Welcome, and I'm really pleased that we've got people here today. I'm Steve Selwood. I'm the Facilities Manager for the Trust and also part of the Care Without Carbon team. So I'm hoping that we're going to have a really good interactive session, that we're going to hear some good things from CAN and from the Council. Could I ask anybody who isn't going to be talking to mute their mic just so that we don't get background noise? And please put comments as we go and any questions in the comments section. So I think that's all from me. I will hand over to Mike.
Thanks very much. Right, now we have the technical challenge of sharing the screen. My okay, here we go. Excellent. Yeah, I just wanted to tell you about our journey to net zero. And we've entitled the campaign Care Without Carbon. Just to introduce myself, my name is Mike Kenny. I'm from LCMB. We are consultants to the Trust in terms of energy and carbon. We've been working with them for a few years now. So we've been taken on to produce the Green Plan. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea as to what we're doing in that area. So in October 2020, the NHS published a new strategy on delivering a net zero national health service across the country. I mean, the National Health Service in itself is quite a big emitter, and it's been estimated it's actually probably responsible for about 4% of the national carbon footprint. So these reduction targets have been set by the NHS, by NHS England. So we're looking at net zero by 2040 for what they call the carbon footprint. And by that, I mean the scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then there's also an ambition to reach 80% reduction by 2028 to 2032. So that's not too far away. It is quite ambitious. And then for what they call carbon footprint plus, so that is all scopes 1, 2, and 3, there's an ambition to be net zero by 2045. So they've put together this nice little diagram that just sort of sums up what the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. So if I just zoom in on this area a little bit more. So scope 1 is what we're actually burning. So it's the gas in the gas-fired boilers that's producing the heat at the hospital. It's the gas in the CHP. I mean, we've actually got a sort of almost a mini power station, 4 megawatt CHP, which is gas-fired. And it produces electricity, probably about 70% of the electricity required by the Royal Berkshire Hospital site in Reading. Anesthetics are another big area that are scope 1. And then, of course, there's the fleet vehicles, not company cars as such, but certainly leased cars that staff have use of. Scope 2 is the electricity. I mean, the emissions are really generated at the power station, but obviously the Trust is responsible for how much electricity it uses, so we include that in the scope 3. And then in scope 2, sorry, but in scope 3, these are all the indirect. So this is what they include in what they call carbon footprint plus. So things like the medicines, food and catering, staff commuting, the water, the waste, the business travel. So where people, the grey fleet, where staff are claiming expenses when they visit other sites. Construction, manufacturing, ICT, these are all areas that are, when we put together, going to estimate the carbon footprint of the entire organisation. We can split up those emissions in terms of percentages. So 24% of emissions are scope 1 and 2. So if we look at the building energy of the trust. I mean, this is just the gas and electricity from the energy used is only 10%. So the bigger percentage is 76% are actually scope 3 emissions, and they're the ones that we're quantifying and measuring at the moment. So to give you an idea of what we've done, we're trying to work together as a whole. So getting as many people involved as possible. So we formed a steering group at the top. So that's the sort of key senior management stakeholders. And we're all going to work together to produce this green plan, which is how we're going to manage our road to net zero. And this is at board level. The NHS have said we have to have a board level representative. And it's great to get carbon and sustainability on the agenda. And then we've also put together some net zero champion working groups. So these are people from all levels across the trust who put their hands up and said, yep, I'd like to take part. I'd like to help out, and I've got an interest in sustainability. So we've had some workshops along those lines already. And we're going to have more focused staff focus groups as well. And this is one of the partner and public focus groups. So it's really hoping that we can work together with the likes of Reading Can, with Reading Borough Council. I think you're probably a lot further down the road to net zero than we are, but it'd be nice to be able to work together and pool our ideas, and maybe we can take advantage of some of the measures that you've put in place. And then surrounding all of this is the communications plan. So really just, there's a group of people that are trying to raise people's awareness of sustainability, recycling, cutting energy across the whole site, including and engaging staff and patients and key stakeholders. We've already had a little bit of a steer from the Greener NHS Southeast region. So they've looked at what the NHS is responsible for and given 3 different priorities. So the regional Southeast team has suggested 3 net zero priorities for the coming year. So this is what we're going to be working on most. Medicine, so reducing the proportions and optimizing use of certain anesthetic gases. Supporting clinical moves from aerosol to dry powder inhalers and improved disposal of those. So there's quite a big carbon impact from both anesthetic gases and inhalers, which we're going to be addressing. Travel and transport, I mean, the trust is already pretty good in terms of their fleet, 6 electric vehicles and 6 chargers are at the north end of the hospital in Reading. And they already do have a range of incentives to give staff, like salary sacrifice schemes for electric vehicles, targeting better air quality, targeting reduced carbon emissions from petrol and diesel vehicles. And then the third area is digitally enabled remote working, really just trying to build on the progress achieved last year and this year with a range of digitally enhanced initiatives to support remote and flexible working and capitalize on some digital models of care, and really just embracing the technology and the advantages it can give us. Yeah, I mentioned the pool of 6 electric vehicles and EV chargers at the hospital. In addition to that, they also have a cycle to work scheme, an electric cycle scheme, and a newly opened cycle village, which Steve, I'm hoping that you might be able to go into a little bit more detail on that when you're doing your talk. And then one of the key areas is in waste. The trust sends absolutely no waste to landfill. So where it does go is it gets incinerated. So about 500 odd tons are disposed of by other forms of recoveries. There's also some anaerobic digestion, but incineration, energy to waste, is responsible for about 1,000 tons. And they had quite a good slogan, the KISS slogan, which is keep it simple and segregate. And what we see here is one of the staff recycling the PVC masks. So the PVC take-back scheme is known as Recomed, and since 2017, the staff at Royal Berkshire have recycled nearly 2,000 tonnes of PVC masks and tubing. So not only does that save the trust over £1,000 in disposal costs and reducing carbon emissions by about 2.8 tonnes, it's good for everyone. So in particular, recycling in the theatres, they've been pioneers and led the way. And they've actually were awarded the Green Apple Environment Awards in 2019. So I'm going to finish off by highlighting this young lady who's called Karen Leach, who works in the theatres, and she really has led the way in terms of recycling, segregating, reusing in the theatres, and she's one of our energy champions. I'm going to play this. It is a sort of 5-minute video. It should start in a second, so please enjoy.
It's not working.
You've got your sound problem again, Mike.
Oh dear, okay. Okay, this should fix it with a bit of luck.
My name is Karen Leach, and I'm here to tell you about the changes we've made within the department and how we use staff engagement to make all the environmental improvements. It's important that we learn within the NHS and within our trust how we reuse, reduce and recycle items.
No. No.
So these aren't recyclable. These go in the household waste.
Well done.
So from Theatres and Recovery, we've started to increase our awareness and promote recycling. This has just been making staff more aware about how we display and put our rubbish. So from now on, we start putting drug boxes and plastic inserts into the recycling. We also start to decrease our clinical waste by not putting wax paper packets in there anymore and putting them in the black bag. So oxygen masks and tubing was started by Dr. Lauren Williams. Since it started in 2017, we've saved 3 tonnes of plastic waste that's gone off recycling. That's a saving of £1,700. We started to reduce our clean anaesthetic waste. This was promoted by one of our ODPs, Dawn Logie. She arranged with a company that it would go to a scrap store and these would be used to make art projects. We decided both in Theatres and Recovery that we would stop using the single-use drug trays. So we went for reusable ones. In theatres we used 3,600 a month, costing of £1,800 a month. We now save the trust £5,400. We have no more purchase of drug trays made from Recovery. Recycling champions, they kept tabs and audits and promoted the reusable drug trays for each areas.
Anyway, just tell you about the new recycling station that's happening. Southing, look at it, it's all lovely. We've got blue for recycling. Tell you on there what it is. Household waste, got it all in. Now doing bread and crisps and coming soon food.
We changed how we went using staff mugs in Recovery and theatres. We encouraged all staff to start bringing in their own travel mugs, and we reduced how many cups we were using for every day. We changed to an eco-friendly cup. We've reduced our ordering of cups from 4,000 to 1,000 a month. We changed to a reusable water cup, which reduced our carbon footprint. We also encourage staff now to bring in their own travel cups to use for water, therefore reducing how many plastic cups we order every day.
The first day of Christmas, my true love sent to me a reusable cup of my tea. Day of Christmas, my true love sent to me all this cutlery.
This is our huge store area for theatres and Recovery. From stores, we've noticed a huge drop in ordering, which again saves our carbon footprint.
It's quite surprising, actually, from a clinical point of view, how much equipment can be recycled. And I think people have been really proactive in it because Karen's had such a transformational leadership style putting this together. And she's quite a dynamic, bubbly person that she's really got people on board, and people are like, yay, let's go with it. And I think as the weeks and months go on, we see it increasing and increasing on a monthly basis.
Everyone in healthcare has a responsibility to take action. I'm doing by checking all the recyclable boxes at the bottom and check the number. If it's to be recycled, I put it in the recycle bin.
By getting Grundon to come in a few weeks ago to do a training session was really good to answer questions that we weren't sure where things were supposed to go. So from a student point of view, it's good because we're teaching them from the start of their career about the recycling we do within the trust, and then as they progress through their training and their course, they're seeing practitioners doing more and more recycling as we learn how to recycle things in a different way than what we've been currently doing, chucking it out in the normal rubbish.
I think it's been fantastic. The staff have really all got on board. I think through the effects of sort of clinical governance, where Karen has very much taken this project to, and also through a lot of our staff meetings, the team have been very much on board and have actually really helped to drive the project to be a success.
The whole dynamic of the department has changed to incorporate the recycling passion that Karen has got. She's got us all involved.
That's great. Thanks very much. And I'll stop presenting and hand over to Steve.
Thanks very much. Let me make sure that I can share. I think, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Oh, good. That was a very worrying pause. As Mike has, I think actually, sorry for a second, I think I need to come out of that again. Oh my goodness, now I can't get out of it. Sorry about this, because there was a little thing at the top here I didn't press, which means you wouldn't have heard anything. Right, now we can go for it. And no, we can't go for it, sorry. I'm so sorry about this. I've been practicing all afternoon and now my PowerPoint presentation has decided it wants to reprogram itself. Anyway, let me.
Shall we change the running order and just give you a bit of time, Steve, to put together?
I think I may well be back. I think I'm back.
Okay.
If not, then yes, please. That's my goodness. I'm sorry for this. Here we go. Is that happening?
Yeah, we can see that.
Fantastic. I just happened to be on the wrong slide, honestly. Right, as Mike said, in 2019, we did win the Gold Green Apple Award for environmental good practice. Now, unfortunately, the pandemic got in the way of us continuing at the pace that we were doing, because we had to change the way that we actually disposed of waste, given the infection rates and so on and so forth. And we're looking now to recover from that. Now, the way that we got to that position was, as Mike says, that we had the Kiss It Better campaign, which is keep it simple, segregate. And we don't want people getting, that up close to their waste, but we do want them understanding what it is that they're throwing away and where that waste is actually going. And now, of course, with the Care Without Carbon, our remit is beyond waste, into electricity, into water, into travel, into all of those things. So that's where we're heading, and we're hoping to reinstate a lot of what we were doing. The other message that we gave to staff was reduce it, sort it, bag it, tag it, bin it, and lock it. And if we do those 6 things, then we ensure that the trust is compliant to the waste regulations. In 2020 and 2021, our waste tonnage from the trust was 1,804 tonnes, which is the equivalent of 328 elephants, to give you some idea, or 143, the equivalent weight of 143 double-decker buses. It also was at the almost equivalent cost of a 7-bedroom detached house in Wokingham. So we're talking about a lot of waste, and we're talking about a lot of money, and we're really ripe to reduce that, to reduce the amount of waste that we're doing, and reduce our costs, and of course, as a result, reduce our carbon. Just as a side, our pharmaceutical waste, 9,730 pounds. And there's a lot of scope, I think, for us to look at our pharmaceuticals and how we deal with them. And I'm hoping that as this project rolls out, that's where we'll be looking, among other places. Of course, what we want to do is to use these prevention and reuse. We've actually introduced now a reuse for furniture, where we can pull out furniture that is useful and upcycle it within the trust. But we're also wanting to get people to do, as they've done in theatre, that is look at preventing bringing the waste in by using reusables rather than disposables. And then, of course, looking at rolling out more of the recycling. It's very difficult in a hospital situation to recycle some of our stuff, because some of it's pretty grim and will put people off. But I'm hoping to develop more and more, looking at waste as a resource rather than just disposal. And then we've got, of course, we've got recovery and disposal. What I want to do now is just show you where our waste goes. And what I found over the last couple of years as I've shared this, and the way that we get rid of our waste, because it is zero to landfill, people are more inspired when they realize it's going to produce electricity for 50,000 homes rather than go into landfill. Then I think people are a little more focused on actually ensuring that the waste is put in and segregated correctly, to reduce the carbon, to reduce the cost, and to reduce our waste.
This is an amazing place, the Lakeside Energy from Waste facility at Colnbrook near Heathrow Airport. It cost £160 million to develop, and it's one of the most sophisticated facilities of its type in Europe. It's capable of generating enough power to meet the domestic needs of nearly 50,000 households. And its exhaust emissions meet the most stringent European legislation. The plant is a joint venture between 2 specialist recycling and waste management companies, Grundon and Viridor. And it shows what's possible when 2 forward-thinking companies get their heads and investment plans together. One of the things you realise when you look into waste is just how varied and different it all is. Ideally, we all want to reduce waste or reuse it. Where waste can't be prevented, we try to recycle it. And we're always looking for new ways to recycle more and more waste, and we're getting better at it. But some things can't be reduced, reused, or recycled. So what do? In what's known as the waste hierarchy, there's a 4th step after reduce, reuse, and recycle, which is recover, or specifically, energy recovery. And that's what an energy from waste facility like this one is all about. It's a smarter and better option than simply dumping what can't be recycled into the ground. The 5th and final option, disposal into landfill. Here at Lakeside, material which can't be recycled, known as residual waste, is put to productive use. burning it at high temperatures under controlled conditions in our modern, efficient, purpose-built facility. The result? Less landfill and lots of energy. This first-class facility processes more than 410,000 tonnes of residual waste each year. Imagine Wembley Stadium filled to the roof with rubbish. That's how much waste is diverted from landfill each year. At the same time, the plant generates enough power to meet the domestic needs of nearly 50,000 homes. That's enough electricity to power all the houses in Slough. Household and commercial residual waste is delivered into a massive bunker that can hold 7,500 tonnes of the stuff. Grab cranes mix the waste and load it into a hopper, where hydraulic rams push it into one of 2 incineration lines. At this point, waste becomes fuel. It typically burns at 950 degrees centigrade for at least 2 seconds. This creates the heat to produce power. It turns water into superheated steam, which drives a high-pressure turbine to power an electric generator. Once the steam has done its job turning the turbines, it's condensed and returned to the boiler. All that's left from the combustion flow process is metal and ash. These are moved away on conveyor belts, and the metal is separated by magnets and collected for recycling. The ash is taken away for reprocessing. It is then used in road building and construction as a substitute for raw materials taken from the land and the sea. Around 1/3 of the plant is devoted to cleaning up exhaust gases. The hot gases from the combustion process are treated to remove pollutants. For instance, lime is used to absorb acid gases, activated carbon to fix combustion byproducts, and ammonia to remove oxides of nitrogen. Advanced filtering systems also capture the ash and small particles which would otherwise go up the chimney. The gas cleanup residues are then disposed of in an appropriately licensed disposal facility. The operation is constantly monitored against the toughest environmental standards, and the plant operates to a strict environmental permit. The Environment Agency has 24/7 access to both the plant and the online monitoring data. The plant powers itself and generates enough surplus power, around 34 megawatts of electricity, to be exported every year into the national grid. 95% of plant input, which would otherwise have been landfilled, is recycled or converted to energy, primarily as electricity for homes. Energy from waste helps local councils
Steve, I think you've muted yourself and we can't hear anything.
which maximizes energy recovery and resource efficiency. Lakeside Energy from Waste, turning rubbish into power.
That's great. I hope you managed to hear that.
Mostly.
Oh dear. Let me try and go back to you guys. So if there's any questions, otherwise I'll hand back to Mike.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. Thanks very much. I was just noticed a couple of questions from the floor. So Kiki Contra has just asked, are we working with suppliers in procurement to see what they can do to increase availability of more sustainable products? I mean, yes, the trust purchases a huge amount of items every year, costing millions and millions of pounds. And what we are doing is we're putting a new criteria, sustainability criteria, into all the tendering processes. So local companies will get an increased score, suppliers who are using products that are closer to home will be looked at favourably. And basically, we're going to score them on a carbon basis. So those that are actually suppliers that are promising net zero themselves are going to be selected in over and above ones that perhaps aren't. So yeah, procurement is a big area and one that we are addressing. So for every business case, for every project, there will be a sustainability element at the trust.
Thank you, Mike. Can I just, because you said this is just for new tenders going out, what are we doing with our existing suppliers?
Yeah, that's something we're going to be persuading them to take sustainability into account. I mean, tenders get retendered on a regular basis, but we will be communicating with our existing suppliers to encourage them to be more sustainable.
Thank you.
Okay, and if I could hand over to Peter now. Peter Moore is from Reading Borough Council, and you have the floor.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Mike, and well, thank you to RBH for putting this event on. I'm delighted to see you engaging with this really important agenda. When I accepted the invitation for this meeting, it was just an invitation. I thought I could sit back and listen to everybody else do the hard work, but by the time I got back from holiday on Monday, it had turned into a request for a presentation. So you'll forgive me if it's my hasty assembled PowerPoint shows that it was hastily assembled, and I'll just try and share that with you now. Here we are. Do let me know if and when it appears. It says it's loading for me at my end. Okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. That's a good sign. Okay, well, the request was to talk a little bit about the council's role when it comes to climate change. So we have several. The council is obviously the democratically elected voice of the people of Reading. So I think we have an important role in community leadership. So when Reading Borough Council passed the Climate Emergency Declaration in February 2019, we did so not just on our own account, but on behalf of the whole community. The council has important policy and regulatory roles, particularly in areas like transport, planning, spatial planning, waste management, but also in wider economic, environmental and social policy, which give us various levers that we can pull to influence and drive action to support our net zero ambitions. The very ambitious target we've set for ourselves in the Climate Emergency Declaration being to achieve a net zero Reading by 2030. As an organisation, as we just heard from colleagues at RBH, we obviously have direct control over emissions for the services that we provide, the buildings in which those services are delivered, vehicles used to deliver those services and so on. But we also have a much wider influence in terms of the goods and services that we procure, as we've also just heard, and we can send signals to the wider market about our expectations and that suppliers will be part of our journey to net zero. And we recently adopted, similarly to what colleagues were describing just now, a new social value policy, which incorporates measures on carbon reduction. We're in the process of applying those to an increasing range of our procurement processes. I think there's a role for the council, a really important role in the context of this discussion, to identify and deliver the multiple benefits that climate action can produce. So, when we're taking action to improve air quality, to reduce traffic, to promote public transport, to promote walking and cycling, that's also delivering significant public health benefit in terms of active travel and getting people moving about. Similarly, if we're taking action to insulate homes, then that's not just reducing emissions, but it's improving the health of residents, tackling fuel poverty, and stimulating the local economic sector for green goods and services, which is important as well. And final role, I suppose, is there's an important role for leadership by example. I think we accept that. We recognise that if we don't reduce our emissions and set ambitious targets, we can't really expect and exhort others to follow. So that's very much part of our thinking. There's not time today to go into everything we do that relates to this important agenda, so I'm just flagging a few key sort of policy areas that you might recognise where we're trying to make a difference. If you live in Reading, you'll know that we recently rolled out food waste collection for residents, which in a very short space of time has increased our recycling rate in the borough from 32% to 52%. Basically, that's the huge increase that we've seen between April last year and April this year as a result of that one measure. From a climate point of view, huge reduction in methane emissions, which are one of the most potent, if short-lived, greenhouse gases that we're trying to tackle, and that would otherwise have ended up in a landfill. So a really big step in the right direction. Anyone else who knows Reading will be familiar with our iconic fleet of Reading buses, a municipal bus company, and which is such an iconic feature of the townscape in Reading. I think it's easy to take them for granted when you're in Reading a lot, but trust me, there's a lot of places that have no such service. And while nationally the trend for bus use is downwards, I think with the investment that we've made in Reading buses and the infrastructure, the bus priority measures that go with that, we've consistently bucked the national trends for declining bus use, which is a very good news story. From the planning field, in the new Reading local plan, we've got pioneering policies on zero carbon homes, which are driving energy efficiency standards beyond the level that were required in national policy, that we anticipate and hope that will very much catch up with us. And in our own housing stock, which represents about 10% of the total, we are also investing in both retrofit of the existing stock and indeed high energy efficiency standards and application of passive house principles in all of the new homes that we're developing, which is about as good as it gets. And as a result of that, the average energy ratings for Reading Borough Council housing are significantly better than the averages for not just the rest of the housing stock nationwide, but also the social housing stock nationwide. So that's something to be proud of, though we've got an awful long way to go before we're in line with our net zero aspirations. And a final point I put on there just about how we're looking after our green spaces and some ambitious plans for extending tree cover within the borough, which will help in a small way with carbon sequestration, but actually really important to help us adapt to the impacts of a changing climate that we're going to see. So countering that urban heat island effect that we expect to see more of, reducing flood risk and providing shading, cooling and shelter for people and wildlife. So those are a few examples of the sort of wider policy initiatives that we're pursuing. And I think that contributes to what's a pretty good positive picture that Reading's got to present in the sense of the national statistics for emissions by local authority area, where you can see from that graph, Reading's got seen a reduction in carbon emissions of 49% since the baseline year of 2005, which puts us about fifth, I think, nationally out of 379 local authority areas in terms of the biggest reduction that we've seen. Now, there's some small print attached to that. These measures relate to production emissions, so that things that are made in Reading rather than things that are consumed in Reading, and the consumption figure is a significantly bigger number, and we're very mindful of that too. But this is the official sort of national measure for carbon emissions, and that shows you that I think that we're heading in the right direction as a borough, although we know we need to increase the pace to be in line with our net zero ambitions. So that's a bit on the wider Reading picture, just focusing in on what we're doing as an organisation. We set out our stall in how we're trying to get ourselves to net zero as a council in something called the Carbon Plan. And that sort of takes 5-year chunks. So we've just approved a new carbon plan for the period 2020 to 2025. And the headline target within that is for us to reduce our corporate emissions by 85% by 2025 en route to net zero by 2030. It's a really important document for controlling our energy use, obviously, and also the costs associated with that, which is a huge issue at the moment with the massive inflation in energy prices that we're seeing. And it also is the way that we hope to demonstrate some leadership by example. Just a few priorities within that carbon plan then to highlight. We're moving away from reliance on gas for heating towards low carbon electricity. So that means taking out, the gas boilers in the basement of our many buildings and replacing them with heat pumps over time. Looking at projects for our civic centre and also the Hexagon Theatre. We were discussing only this morning about some exciting plans we've got to do work at that important venue. We're looking at electrifying the entire vehicle fleet. So we've got quite a few EVs already in place at the moment. But the ambition is to, if it can be electrified, we're going to do it, basically. There's a few little petrol mowers and things that we've got. There isn't an electric version available of yet, but if it's doable, we've made that commitment to make that transition. And key among that is to do the refuse collection vehicles, which are the biggest emitters within our fleet, and also the trickiest nuts to crack. But I'll say a bit more about that towards the end of my presentation. Important to say, I think, and this might be worth thinking about for others of you along the same sort of journey with your vehicle fleets. We think there's as much carbon to be saved by making sure that we're not using bigger vehicles than we need, and using logistics and getting a bit smart about that to right size the fleet, rather than just replace every vehicle we've got with an electric version. Because that way we are just squeezing out unnecessary mileage. We're making the whole cost of electrifying the fleet more affordable because it will reduce the capital cost. And obviously that bit of carbon which is still being generated to power electric vehicles will be reduced proportionally as well. We're looking at potential for more solar on our buildings. We're looking even at a potential for a solar farm on a bit of agricultural land that we own. There's some planning hurdles to overcome before we can be confident about delivering that. You'll probably be aware we've already converted our street lighting to LED, but still a bit more carbon to be squeezed out of that with some clever tricks that we're currently exploring the potential to do a bit more with. And we're also looking at how battery storage and smart technology can help us move into this new world where we're using a lot less fossil fuel, but we're using a lot more electricity, and what that does to supply and demand, and what that does to grid, what that means in terms of grid capacity and grid connections, and working through some really big questions around that with our network operator, SSE. So there's a few of the projects. I'll say, address the sort of killer question really, is it working? Well, this is a little graph showing the sort of journey that we're on with our carbon footprint. I mean, the council didn't start tackling this when we passed the climate emergency declaration. Ben, my colleague who's on the call, has been at this for some time before I arrived at Reading Borough Council. And I think we've got a really good track record of investing in low carbon and reducing our energy use over time, which is reflected in that graph there. To the extent that since our baseline year, which is 2008-2009, we've managed to reduce our corporate carbon emissions by about 63.5%, which is pretty good. But obviously, every percentage now we have to squeeze out to get us to net zero by 2030 gets that bit harder. We've done all the easy stuff, and it's more and more challenging as we go. But that's the commitment that we've made. I think worth pointing out from that slide as well, if you see the figure that RBC's emissions are about 7,000 tonnes. You remember the figure from the earlier graph that Reading's emissions as a borough are about 493 kilotons. That shows you that the council's emissions are about 1.5% of the total for the borough. So that's not to belittle the impact we can have, but I think it does put in perspective, perhaps some of the limitations to our influence as well as some of the potential that we have. Just to close then with a little case study, which I hope illustrates the ambition that we're bringing to this work. Our main depot at Bennett Road is one of our major energy users, and we're in the middle of a multi-phase project to decarbonise that site. We've refurbished the buildings to make sure they're as energy efficient as possible. We've replaced gas heating with heat pumps, and we're in the process of electrifying the fleet, as I mentioned, with about 200 EVs due for replacement by 2028. Most visible of those are obviously the refuse collection vehicles, one of which is pictured here. And we were very proud to take delivery of that, our first electric refuse collection vehicle just last month. And that's been operational with great success. The drivers are queuing up to drive it apparently because it gets them around their rounds quicker because it's a bigger capacity than the old trucks. So they'll get home a bit earlier if they can get the EV. So that's creating a nice healthy dynamic at the depot. And I think there's a lot of pride as well in the fact that we are investing in the fleet and making it cleaner and greener all the time. And we can also, as the logo on the side shows, we can show residents that the food waste we collect from them goes off to the anaerobic digester where it generates electricity, which is pumped into the grid. And ultimately that comes back to power vehicle, which is a lovely example of the sort of circular economy that we all talk about in practice. Just a final word, I think, because I've focused very much in that presentation on the subject of reducing our emissions and sort of climate mitigation in the jargon, but probably worth noting the importance of adapting to climate impacts as well, particularly in the health context. Because we all need to make ourselves more aware of and more resilient to those impacts which are coming whether we like it or not, even if we are successful in reaching our carbon reduction emissions tomorrow. So in a health context, I guess, and you'll know this better than me, but those impacts will either compound and exaggerate existing risks or bring new ones with implications for service users, particularly vulnerable service users, implications for staff, implications for the settings and the buildings in which we are providing our public services to those people. So, a really important agenda, and one which, while there's an understandable focus on emissions reduction with the COP26 talks approaching, I suspect we've only just begun to scratch the surface of, and hopefully we'll have time for some discussion of today.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Peter. That was really good. Really enjoyed that. Before we hand over to Tracy, I was just looking at the conversation and a couple of questions regarding food waste. So Lorraine mentioned that food waste bins across the borough would make a significant impact. Is that something that you're considering, Peter?
Yeah, I'm sure we are. The whole range of things that can be recycled, collected at the curbside and on the street is constantly under review, and obviously we're looking to expand that all the time, and at the same time, improve the quality of the recyclates, because if we can get that right, get that business of separation right, that improves the economics throughout the whole sort of supply chain and makes that whole circular economy equation much easier to pull off. So yeah, a constantly shifting picture, but certainly the introduction of the domestic collections was a big step, probably overdue, but we're delighted to have got there.
Thanks. And Megan Fuller asked a question. I think probably Steve would be the best one to answer. Is there or could there be any plan for food waste bins at Royal Berks?
Yes, it's something that we've spoken to Grundons about. That it's really looking at the logistics and how that food would be taken from the wards down to a collection point. Also, we have a gadget within the catering department that reduces the bulk, and our waste currently goes off to the waste to energy. But it is something that we're looking at. Our cooking oil goes off for fuel. But yeah, I'm very, very interested in actually looking and seeing at the economics and the logistics of actually doing the food waste.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Right, if I could hand over now to Tracy, who is from Reading Can. Thanks very much, Tracy.
Hello there, can everyone hear me? Wonderful, thank you. I have some slides to share with you, so just bear with me while I fire them up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, you see my slides? I've got a very badly timed tickly throat now, so I'll see how we do. At least I've got some water to hand. So hello everyone, thank you very much for inviting me along. My name's Tracy Rawling Church and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Reading Climate Change Partnership. So I'm a sustainability consultant by profession, and my other co-chair is Tim Dixon, who's an academic leading the Built Environment Department at Reading University. So between us, we bring kind of commercial and academic expertise to the board, which works quite well. So I'm going to talk you through the activities of the Reading Climate Change Partnership. Assuming my slides decide that they will move on. Oh, there we go. So we were actually formed back in 2007. So way before the climate emergency and the current strong interest in climate change. We were originally part of the local strategic partnership. Those have since been disbanded, but we had a very strong partnership in Reading, and so we decided to carry on regardless, which meant that we were already in place when a climate emergency was declared, which meant that we could hit the ground running. So we're a multi-stakeholder voluntary partnership. We're hosted by Reading Borough Council, so that they provide us with office facilities and a home for our single member of staff. But they only hold one seat on the board alongside a number of other anchor institutions, including local businesses, the university. The health sector is represented by Paul Harrison, who's sustainability manager at Berkshire Healthcare. So we try to make sure that we have a broad range of interests across the board, representing all the various different stakeholder groups in the town. And we run on sunshine. So we don't receive any external funding, but we managed to get a grant some years ago, which we invested in solar PV, which provides us with a small revenue stream. So our vision, in line with Reading's declaration of a climate emergency, is a net zero climate resilient town by 2030. And the way that we activate that vision is through the Reading Climate Action Network. So that represents individuals, communities and organisations coming together in Reading to tackle climate change. And really, we're trying to engage with anybody who lives, works, studies or spends leisure time in Reading to get them thinking about climate change and what they can do about it, both individually and as part of the organisations and businesses that they represent. So the strategy was developed with a lot of input from the community. From the declaration of a climate emergency in February 2019, we convened a public event that summer to get people's input into what they thought should be our priorities in the climate emergency strategy. We held another event specifically for businesses and organisations a couple of months later. And then we also commissioned an adaptation report. So this is, although we had published 2 previous climate change strategies, we'd never had an adaptation report for Reading. So the first one was produced in January last year. And then we published our draft climate emergency plan for public consultation. We took all the insights that we were offered from our various respondents on a public consultation, and then obviously, in the meantime, there'd been a small issue of pandemic. So we were due to launch the strategy originally in November 2020. We brought it forward to July in response to the declaration of a climate emergency, and then we had to push it back again due to the pandemic. So we ended up launching it on the original schedule. So that was just under a year ago. And very much a joint effort through the board of the Climate Change Partnership. Written by our 6 theme leads, and each of them convened a small task force that supported them with content. So it was very much a collaborative effort. The way that the plan and indeed the strategy is structured is we have 6 pillars. So you can read across there the blue columns, things like energy, transport, water, etc. Importantly, we have a health and well-being theme. Now, again, in the previous iterations of our climate strategy, we didn't have a health and well-being strand. So that was introduced newly for the climate emergency strategy, and again, turned out to be quite timely, given that one of the risks that we identified was the introduction of novel viruses through either changing weather patterns or incursion of humans into previously unexplored habitats. And then sitting across those 6 themes, we have an overarching communications and engagement work stream. So there's a theme lead for each of those 7 areas. And then we have horizontal strands that look at education, community, business, and as Peter referred to, also adaptation. We're very much focused on the benefits of acting on climate change. It's really important that we don't present this as a kind of hair shirt option. And we've already heard in the previous presentations that actually, there are significant commercial benefits to be gained through things like better management of waste. It can save costs, and that can be really important for organisations. But, we can also have healthier, happier lifestyles. We can have warmer, safer homes. We can have quieter, safer streets. We get better water, better access to green space. So there are lots of co-benefits associated with taking action on climate change that can actually improve the quality of life of people in Reading, as well as helping to combat the impact of carbon emissions. So I just wanted to show you a few of our activities. This is our website, which we launched at the same time as the Climate Emergency Strategy and Action Plan last November. And I've deliberately pulled out these particular menu items to demonstrate that it's very action oriented. So it's very much based on providing practical advice and guidance for individuals, organisations and schools on what they can do. And that's kind of organised into topic areas that should make it really easy to navigate. Generally speaking, the majority of our carbon emissions are based on what we eat, how we heat and how we move. And so those things are obviously, of significant importance, but then we also try to focus on the little things as well. So you might have noticed I didn't have my camera on when other people were presenting, and just not using video on a video conference call actually reduces your carbon emissions by 90%. So, we've got the big stuff, but we've also got the little hints and tips as well. The other thing that we did last November was we instigated Reading Climate Festival. So that was originally held last November to support the launch of the climate emergency strategy. But it was well received and people seemed to find it useful. So we repeated it a couple of weeks ago, and it is now an annual event in Reading's calendar and getting bigger and broader in scope year by year. And then we have a continuing programme of ongoing engagement through various social media channels. And as restrictions are relaxed now that we're not having to self-isolate quite so much, we are beginning to introduce live events now back into our schedule as well. So I suppose our main role in the town is threefold: to inform and empower people to take action, to convene different organisations and promote collaboration between them. A good example of that is one of the meetings that we hosted during Reading Climate Festival. Reading UK has the ambition to become the first, or to have the first, green business improvement district in the country. And so we hosted a meeting of various stakeholders to just try and imagine what a green business improvement district might look like and what kind of interventions would work. And one of the points raised by Lorraine earlier in the chat about maybe having some food waste collection in the town that works with the community and voluntary sector to redistribute to the needy. That's something that actually came up at that meeting and that we're actively looking at as something that maybe the hospitality sector could get involved in. So trying to, surface ideas and bring people together that might be able to help deliver them. So very much delivering through partnership is what we tried to do. So that's where you can find out about us. And if anyone has any specific questions about the partnership and Reading Climate Action Network, I would be delighted to take them.
Kiki, you've your hand up.
Yeah, hi Tracy. Just on the point you said about turning the camera off, it reduces carbon emissions by 90%. 90% compared to what?
90% compared to having it on, if you see what I mean. So there's 90% less energy involved with running a sound only online meeting.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There is a bit of a weighing up the benefits though of having a bit more of an interactive meeting when you do have the camera.
No, absolutely. I mean, certainly if the meeting requires people to be interactive, then having the cameras on is really useful. But if you're all looking at slides, there's not much point.
Okay. No, I didn't know that, and I will be taking it. I will be doing it going forward if I don't need to interact. Thank you.
Thanks. I was just looking at some of the notes. So these are not necessarily aimed at Tracy, but just bit of a discussion in general, so please feel free to answer. There's a bit of a discussion going on about the production of electricity and how green that is. And I think, yeah, it was Kiki who asked. I'm not sure if you were referring to the combined heat and power, the CHP at Royal Berkshire Hospital, but if you are, you're absolutely right, because at the moment it is gas-fired, and gas is still a fossil fuel. And the whole direction seems to be in the decarbonisation of heating and the electrification of heating, because at least the electricity can be generated by solar and wind and renewable sources. So it is something.
Sorry, I was actually, the question came up when Peter was doing his presentation, or when he made the point of trying to electrify everything that can be electrified. So I just wondered, yeah, because generally I try and go with a green provider, electricity provider. But it was only until 6 months ago that I realised that actually what comes into my house from the grid might not actually be green. It's what the provider produces that's green. So it's that sort of small print that may have affected the supplier I go for if I knew about from the beginning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and we can see the grid is actually decarbonising over time. So although your electricity that you're being used, you're still using it from the grid, but a certain percentage of it will be still from a gas-fired power station, and a certain percentage of it will be from renewables. But there's a really cool little website called gridwatch.co.uk, which will give you real-time indication of the percentages of what renewables are doing. So you can see on a sunny day that's going up. You can see on a windy day the wind power generation is going up. And the big thing is that the coal-fired generation is coming down quite dramatically, and we're getting away from those coal-fired power stations, which were really dirty emitters. But yeah, you addressed the question during Peter's presentation. Perhaps if I could pass over to Peter for your comment.
Yeah, I think what you just said there is right. It's about direction of travel, really, Kiki, with where the grid is heading, and it's heading rapidly in the right direction. I always try and use the word greener when I describe electricity rather than green. So apologies if I didn't on that occasion. But we're very mindful that the electricity is not 100% green, but there are various things we can try and do to make sure that we're making it as green as possible. And corporately, we've recently changed our energy supply contracts, and we're buying what they call a tariff that gives us greater assurance about the REGOs, they call them, Renewable Energy Guarantees of Origin, which give you a bit more comfort that your money is actually going to be invested in renewable energy generation, which then comes into the grid. So it's not a perfect system, but it is heading in the right direction. And electrification is the way to go at the moment. And until or unless somebody does something super clever with hydrogen, then that's the sort of main route through which we can move away from gas and fossil fuels.
Hydrogen could well be the future, couldn't it? But it is expensive to make, and if it's green hydrogen, then great, because it's made from renewable sources. But well, we've come across some organisations that have blended it into their gas supply. So your existing network of gas-fired boilers and cooking hobs and such like will work perfectly fine if you were to put 25% hydrogen blended into the existing gas supply. So there would be a reduction in carbon emissions, but really the future should be a whole nationwide network, a hydrogen grid. But I suspect that's a long way off. Okay, and Tom Lake has asked a question. Reading Borough Council estimated 2 billion as the total housing conversion. You can't see where the main heating load sites in your structures. One of the main difficulties for people in older houses is understanding your house. Energy certification, I suspect he's talking about the EPCs there for selling, is not really suitable. Peter, what do you think of that?
Yeah, housing retrofit is a massive priority and also a massive challenge. And I think that figure, Tom, that 2 billion, it's a bit of a fag bucket calculation, taking a sort of approximate cost of what it would take to retrofit the typical existing home to the standard that we need it to be to align with our net zero ambitions, and then multiplying that by the number of houses we need to do that work to. So it's a bit finger in the air, but it's a very big number. Clearly not a number that we have within our means as the local authority. And it's one of those areas where we're constantly, in communication with government and urging them to, to help us with that, with finding that resource. What we can do is, as I say, invest in our own stock, which is a significant proportion of the Reading total. And we've got an ongoing programme of retrofit, which we are investing in to get our own stock in better condition.
I see that Tom has turned his video on. Did you want to reply to that?
Well, I just think it'd be great if the council could help encourage a whole infrastructure of sort of advisors, reliable advisors, and reliable contractors and so on. There's a whole infrastructure in the retrofit area that just isn't there, and you just don't really know how to proceed is the problem. Even if you've got some money to spend, you don't know where to go to make a good job of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think hydrogen's all very well as a future energy source over gas, but I think everyone should get their house in order in the first place and get that insulation up to speed first before considering air source heat pumps or hydrogen or whatever alternative there might be.
Tom's right, it is a challenge because we've got a legacy of various failed programs where cowboy operators have given the whole sort of area a bad name. So that is one of the many challenges that we're up against when it comes to persuading people to do that work using their own means within their own homes. Private sector retrofit, huge challenge. We just need to be honest about that.
Kiki, you've got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand or is that a new hand?
It's a new hand, if that's okay. I've got a question for probably Peter and Steve. It's about active transport. So you mentioned in your first presentation about the cycling village at the Royal Berks going live, I think next week the date is, which is a great initiative, and I would love to cycle to work because that means I don't need to pay £30 to the gym each month. However, I don't feel safe cycling from Tilehurst to the hospital every day during rush hour traffic. I don't think, well, there's not enough cycle lanes, and the cycle lanes that are there are not, I don't think they're wide enough. And I also don't think that drivers are considerate for other road users in general. So I was just wondering what are we doing as a council and as a hospital to address that?
Over to you for the first response.
Go for a kid just coming in, so forgive any background noise. It's school kicking out time. Active travel, big priority for the council. We've got our own historic programme of investment in improved cycle lanes, and we've been taking advantage of funding made available by government, which is one of the silver linings from the pandemic, was that they found money to invest in active travel, and we've got, if you look on the council's website, you'll see there are various schemes being proposed or out for consultation to improve the network still further. Considerate drivers is as a cyclist myself, yes, it's a problem, and it creates that fear and uncertainty that we'd all like to do away with, and segregation is part of the answer to that. But actually, continue to hammer the message about driver behaviour and driver responsibility, I think is important as well, to make it a safer and more welcoming environment for cyclists, even where there isn't ideal provision. So an ongoing priority. Again, we wish we had more resource to throw at it, but we do what we can. And I think you'll probably seen some publicity around the road resurfacing programme in Reading, which is getting some significant yes. One of the metrics we're using to prioritise where that goes is what are the routes that are used more by cyclists, so that we can make sure that the potholes and the divots and all the rest of it that make cycling harder are addressed in the process, as well as doing the things that we can within that context to basically improve the lot of the cyclists.
Yeah, we've concentrated on trying to attract staff by providing the provision of the cycle village. We've got showers, security, lockable, and so that's the bit that we've concentrated on. But fully understand, I don't think I'd want to cycle either from Tyler's where I am, simply because of those reasons. But hopefully, if people do brave it, then they'll find the cycle village a really good resource with the things that we've provided.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve and Peter. Any other questions from the floor? Don't see anyone putting their hands up, or no. Oh, we've got one from Ben. Ben.
Yes, apologies if I'll put my camera on. Okay. Apologies if I've missed this in the presentation earlier, but I just wondered how the Royal Berks has fared with its carbon footprint over the last decade. I'm aware that you put your big CHP plant in some years ago, and you presumably saw a good impact from that. But how's your carbon footprint shaping up, and how are you planning to take it downwards?
Well, that's what I'm doing at the minute, is establishing this baseline. So it has reduced over the past few years. I must admit, it's probably more to do with improving conversion factors rather than kilowatt hour usage reduction. But I'll be actually measuring and profiling the carbon footprint, including the scope 3, which hasn't been done before. In the meantime, if you do want to have a look at the data, the ERIC return is a good and handy resource online, where each year's gas, electricity and CHP production figures and waste figures are published online. So that's ERIC returns. You can have a look at those.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, if that's everything, I'll probably wind it up at this point a little bit early. But yeah, thank you very much to Tracy and Peter for coming along and making the presentations. You've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, and there are areas there that I'm thinking, yeah, maybe the Royal Berkshire could do that or take that as an initiative and move it forward. But I like this idea of collaboration, of working together, and if we could keep that kind of relationship going moving forward and sharing ideas and successes, we would really appreciate it. So thanks to you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure we'd love to have more engagement from RBH within the work of the Climate Change Partnership. I'm speaking on Tracy's behalf there, so but she's nodding furiously. So let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
It would be really great to have expert input into the health theme, for example, because that is such an important strand of particularly the adaptation conversation.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.